Wednesday, 29 May, year of our Lord 2024. Thank you for joining us, sticking around for the second hour of the late afternoon, early evening edition of the War Room. We're going to go to Jerusalem, and Dean Bachmann from Regent University, formerly Congressman Bachmann, and at one time a presidential candidate and the leading presidential candidate in the 2012 Republican primary. Correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman. I think you're the only woman to actually ever lead in the polls. Am I right about that? You're the only woman ever to lead in the polls and actually won the straw poll or the straw poll in Iowa. I mean, you were the leading contender there for a while. Well, that was in 2011, right, for the 2012 race.
That's right. That was for the 2012 election, and I was the first Republican woman to ever appear in televised presidential debates. I was in 15 debates and then went on to win the Iowa straw poll. And to this day, I'm still the only Republican woman that's ever won a presidential contest.
Extraordinary. Dean, you're in Jerusalem. Two things are happening. One, I want to talk about the World Health Organization, all the updates on that, where we stand, and particularly where we stand in relation to Israel on this.
Well, it really was a momentous day. I'm here for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. I'm the co-chair. We have 500 people from across the world present in Jerusalem for this event. We do this annually. We have members of parliaments from all over the world who are here, and we brought up this issue of the World Health Organization. Many of them were not aware of the issue. And it's very interesting. A door opened up today. I had the opportunity to meet with the Speaker of the Knesset. That's the number 3 person in the Israeli government. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with the President of Israel. So I gave all of them the documentation about the WHO, what this means for Israel in particular, because if this goes through this week, at the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, this would empower the World Health Organization to effectively declare unilaterally from an international organization boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. How do we know this would happen? Later on this afternoon, the subject came up on the agenda, and let me read it for you. The occupied territory of Palestine, which is Israel, and the occupied territory of the Golan Heights. Now, Israel has the legal international right to this land. They have since April 25th of 2020. Nothing is more certain than Israel's legal right under international law to the land. And yet the fiction that Israel is an occupied territory continues to go forward. That's why we know in the crosshairs, if they're successful this week at the World Health Organization, Israel would be the first subject to be first nation to be subjected to boycott, divestment, sanction. In other words, the World Health Organization would seek to shut down the economy of Israel, and it would just be asymmetrical warfare against the Jewish state. So this is extremely important. So I was extremely grateful to have the meeting today with the Speaker of the Knesset and also other members of the Knesset as well, who are very influential, who are weighing in on this. So the Knesset is getting this faster than the United States Congress has understood the threats and perils that this would be to national sovereignty. So that's good news. Now, what happened today on the progress of the Global Pandemic Treaty and the international health rules, there were many different resolutions that were circulating in the chamber of the World Health Organization. They're trying to put a deal regarding the pandemic treaty. If they can't do that, they're trying to at least progress the international health rules. They're committed to their plan A, which is to pass the international health rules, which would change the World Health Organization from an advisory-only body to a body that has enforcement and teeth. And that means all 194 nations would be subject to the pronouncements from the WHO. And we don't want them to have that power, because once the WHO would have the ability to declare that there's a public health emergency of international concern, then a whole slew of powers opens up. It triggers new powers, and they would effectively have power over the sovereignty of any nation. That's why this is so important. So they are desperate this week. because they haven't revealed any final language, which they were duty bound to do under Rule 55 of their internal rules. They haven't done that. They don't care. They're utterly lawless. They have until Saturday to pass amendments to the international health rules or the pandemic treaty. And so we'll see what happens by Saturday. But the good news is President Trump, in his infamous speech to the Libertarian Party on Saturday, said that when he is elected, he would pull the United States out of any agreement that goes into effect this week. He's well aware of what's happening this week, and he has said that he opposes it, and he will pull the United States out of it. So we have a high contrast between the Biden administration and what the future Trump administration proposes to do.
Okay, let's get Michele Bachmann. We'll get her rebooted in Jerusalem. What I want to do now, because in Michele, I was going to have her talk about the WHO, but then finish with what's happening in Israel, because I don't really see a military strategy that one can comprehend. One of the things we've talked about, and one of the aspects, one of the reports headed today is about the situation in Israel is tied to the rise of Sharia supremacism. I've said this from the beginning. You cannot look at this conflict. You cannot look at what's happening in Europe. You can't look at what's happening in the United States. This is not about Islam. This is a branch of Islam that used to be political Islam, but now is tied to Sharia supremacism. That means Sharia law is supreme over all other law. In the United States, this is whole situation in Michigan, and now we've had an actual major network in Great Britain do a documentary that is quite shocking. Let's go ahead and see this, and I'll bring in the investigative reporter that made this film.
Islam is America's last hope.
What happens when Muslims take over an American city?
Everywhere where these radical Islamists have touched, what you get is chaos. You get violence. You get the subjugation of women.
So you don't think there's any issue in getting a 7-year-old to wear that kind of dress?
I don't think it's really a bad thing.
If you give full license to activist Muslims in America, these are the types of things that they're going to bring to America.
We visited America's only Muslim-dominated city to find out what has changed.
She had a store and there was a goat carcass one time in her dumpster.
Muslim parents don't want art and music for their children. That's discrimination.
How mosques are converting the local population.
Many African American Muslims regard Detroit as the Mecca of our Islam.
How liberals are reacting to the Muslim government.
I've been told by many people that they don't feel safe here anymore.
They were, flying Hamas flags, and we were like, okay.
You had people shouting, "Death to America." What do you think about that chant?
I think it's awesome.
How the Muslim vote could impact the presidential election.
The supporters of the Palestinian cause cannot choose who the next president will be, but they can oust the current president.
And we confronted imams over their past radical comments.
But the Iranian regime locks up political prisoners, it tortures people, and you've supported these people.
There is so much also misunderstanding about Iran.
Was that all lies?
My name is Stephen Edginton, and I'm the US correspondent for GB News. Since Hamas's massacre of Jews on the 7th of October, the Muslim population in America has reacted with fury.
Well, they were killed by Hamas. That's what's alleged.
In April, a pro-Palestine protest in Dearborn, Michigan went viral around the world after several Muslims were heard chanting, I went to Dearborn to speak with local Muslim leaders to understand their reaction to the war in Gaza.
Hello, Stephen. It's nice to meet you.
Steve Edginton joins us from GB News. This will be very shocking to folks in the United States, maybe not to all the war and posse, and maybe even not to Michele Bachmann when we return to her in Jerusalem, because she warned us for years about Sharia supremacism. Talks about this, and Dearborn's not the worst. But Edginton, how did you get the idea? I mean, you're an Englishman. You're here in the U.S. as the lead investigative reporter. How did you even get the idea to go to Dearborn and do this documentary that's going to shock the American people?
Well, interestingly enough, Steve, in the UK, we have seen a massive amount of immigration from Muslim countries, and where people aren't integrating and they're influencing our elections, and particularly the issue of Gaza is influencing elections in the UK, which is very controversial because one would assume that domestic issues would dominate UK elections, things like the economy, inflation, immigration, and so on. But instead, we've seen the rise of Gaza as a political issue in the UK. So I found that absolutely fascinating. I wanted to find out whether the same thing was happening in the United States, and it is. In Dearborn and in Hamtramck, which are two cities in Detroit in Michigan, there has been a huge influx of Muslim immigration, particularly from the conservative Muslim country of Yemen in Hamtramck. And they took over the council, the local government in 2021 and passed a series of laws, including a ban on LGBT flags. Now, your viewers may agree with that, but you've got to remember that it's not just about the LGBT issue. They also passed a law allowing for animal sacrifice in people's residential homes and in people's backyards. Now, there are concerns around this, whether it's animal welfare, whether it's health violations and health codes. One person we interviewed said that they found a goat carcass in their dumpster one day. Also, if you walk around Hamtramck, you'll see young girls and women wearing burqas, which to me seems un-American. I don't know what your viewers would think about that. And certainly it's a very controversial issue in Europe, where you've got, this kind of oppressive headwear that women are wearing. And also there's this conservative Islamic philosophy that seems to have taken over the town and has changed it completely. It used to be a Polish town and now very much a Muslim place to live. So I think we could see these issues dominating elections in the US as well, because remember, Donald Trump won the state of Michigan by just 10,000 votes in 2016. There are more than 10,000 Muslims in Michigan, and many of them are saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump or at least vote against Joe Biden because they see him as a traitor on this issue of Israel. They were also chanting death to America. Don't forget this. Just down the road in Dearborn, people were chanting death to America at a Gaza rally recently. And we interviewed locals, and some people, these weren't necessarily Muslims, but some liberals were saying, we love death to America. We think death to America is one of the least problematic things you could say. That's a direct quote from one of the people that we interviewed in the film. So I think there are so many different interesting angles to what's happening in Dearborn and Hamtramck in Michigan.
I want to go back to the original, is that the lack of assimilation in the United Kingdom, and I'm not even talking about London, I'm talking about the industrial cities in the Midlands. Talk to us about that for a second. What has happened? Because now you've actually had the rise of Islamist parties. But talk to me about this, the concept of assimilation, sir.
The problem you have in many cities in the UK is that Muslims particularly have congregated in areas, in very densely populated areas. So where you have local politicians, they're running elections based on, as I said, Gaza and not on issues facing Brits. And to many Brits, this is bizarre. We normally would focus on, as I said, things like healthcare, the NHS, immigration, the economy. And suddenly this issue of Gaza and foreign wars in the Middle East have become dominant in local elections. There was one by-election recently where the pro-Muslim candidate, a man called George Galloway, won specifically, and he launched his campaign with a flag of Gaza, not the flag of the United Kingdom. So I think there is a real integration problem, and where you've got our politics are basically becoming sectarian, where people are voting along ethnic and religious lines rather than along traditional political lines. So people aren't integrating well. I think there are segregated communities. People aren't learning English. I think there's a lot of tensions going on. And particularly England has seen a huge demographic shift in the last 20 years. I mean, the Muslim population has increased by, I think, over 1 million in just 10 years from 2011 to 2021. So a lot of these people aren't integrating well. There's a lot of radicalism. And we've also seen members of parliament killed by radical Islamic extremists. We saw Sir David Amos just a few years ago was stabbed to death by a Muslim who came here. I think he was an asylum seeker. And we've seen more recently, a terrible acid attack from another asylum seeker, again, from a Muslim country. So I think there are issues not just with integration, but also with extremism, with radicalism. And I worry that people in the United States aren't aware that this is also happening to your country.
In England, has the political elites, and including the media that follows politics, have they been frozen in place? Because with the hate speech laws and everything that we see in the United Kingdom, it's actually very tough. When I do interviews and I talk about this to people, they're like shocked about the language I use when you just try to define what's going on. It's like you can't do it. It's not proper in the UK. Has the established political order and the established cultural and media order been frozen in place on this and refused to even talk about it or address it, much less try to solve it?
I think you just have to look to what happened in Rochdale and across towns all across England, where thousands of young white girls were raped by mostly or largely Pakistani grooming gangs. And they were completely let down by the establishment, let down by the elite, because they refused to talk about it because they were terrified of being called racist. And there have been various reports into these grooming gangs as to why they were let down at every level, whether it was through journalists, MPs, the council or the police. And what people found, or what these reports found, was that there were so many people concerned about being called racist that they refused to stand up for these young children who were being groomed. And I think this broader issue of the elite and the media and the members of parliament who are refusing to be honest about this issue of radical Islam and integration in the UK, there's some serious consequences for their silence. Recently, Nigel Farage was very open and honest, I think, about the issues that are facing the UK in terms of Muslims who don't support what Nigel calls British values. You see that on these marches that are held in the UK every Saturday for Gaza, where people are basically supporting Hamas in many cases. And he was totally shut down by the media for saying that, for something I think is pretty moderate and centrist.
Okay, now I want to go to the U.S. and how you get this idea, because, correct me if I'm wrong, even people like Nigel Farage and people that brought this up a decade ago said this is hate speech in the UK. You can't even address it. You're trying to smear people. And now you're seeing the exact same thing start here in the United States. What did you find in your investigation when you went to Dearborn and you went to, was it Hamtramck, the former Polish immigrant town that's now turned to Islamic, turned to a town of Islamic, particularly Yemen? What did you find?
We found that the Poles have been really being sort of exodus. There's a real exodus of Poles from this town, Hamtramck. So this was historically a Polish kind of industrial center in Detroit. There used to be 3 Polish churches. Now there's only 1. The call to prayer from various mosques that have sprung up calls twice a day. You see people walking around Hamtramck wearing burqas. Lots and lots of signs and shops are in Arabic, not in English. And as you say, many of these people who have come recently are Yemeni Muslims from a very conservative Muslim country. And in 2021, the entire council, for the first time in any American city, became full Muslim. And the mayor is also a Muslim. Now, you've got to remember that these people, as I said earlier, have been passing some very controversial laws, bans on LGBT flags, but also animal sacrifice, allowing for animal sacrifice in people's homes. And the local Polish population, most of them are, I would say, pretty liberal when it comes to their views on diversity and so on. But many of them are angry with the LGBT ban in particular. The former mayor told us that LGBT people no longer feel safe in Hamtramck. And when I asked her, well, do you support increased immigration from Yemeni conservative Muslim countries if that's the case? She said, yes, of course I support it. She couldn't see any contradiction in that argument. So it's quite interesting how the liberals are reacting. And one of the other things we found actually was the Muslims are also refusing music lessons in their local schools. We spoke to one community center who were offering music classes for a local school. And the Muslim parents turned it down because in the Quran, some Muslims believe that music is banned. And the woman who told us this said it was complete discrimination to do this. You're banning all children, not just the Muslim children, from being able to have these classes. So these are the ways that Muslims can change a town once they get into the majority. And this is happening in other places in the United States.
I want to go back to the music and the animal sacrifice. It's not really about Islam. It's about people that interpret Islam, either political Islam or they say Sharia law that comes from the Quran and obviously the other precepts and writings of Muhammad is superior to any other law. That's how you get the music ban, and that's how you get the animal sacrifice. Has anybody pushed back at the state level Has there been any involvement of state authorities to say, hey, this is the United States of America in the 21st century? We can't have something from the medieval ages or from neo-paganism like animal sacrifice. Has there been any pushback at all from authorities?
Not that I'm aware. And Republicans, who you would have thought would be on top of this issue, have in fact been supporting the local Hamtramck Muslim Council because they banned these LGBT flags. You had Michael Flynn, one of President Trump's national security advisors. He came to Hamtramck, I think, last year and met with the local Muslim mayor. And I think that Republicans have perhaps rather naively, or I would say foolishly, seen these people as basically anti-woke allies, as socially conservative because they don't like LGBT propaganda in schools or they don't like LGBT flags flying on government buildings. I think this is probably a mistake. I think you need to distinguish your friends and your enemies. Look what these people are doing. This is un-American. The issue of animal sacrifice, the issue of banning music in schools, the issues of young girls wearing burqas. This is not what Republicans should be supporting. And I just worry that there should be more of a backlash or more of a pushback against what's happening at Hamtramck. And people are blinded by the issues of politics. Obviously, Trump and the Republicans want Muslim votes in Michigan. It's very important. They see an opportunity because Joe Biden seems to be losing that support. But at the same time, as you rightly say, the things that are going on in this town is unacceptable.
And I mean, even Joe Biden's tepid support of Israel is nowhere near part of the MAGA movement. Not all of it, part of the MAGA movement. That's why we'll have Michele Bachmann on here in a second. Do you see any concerning parallels to how this started in the United Kingdom, sir?
I think so. I think this is exactly how it begins. You have one local community, one area that becomes Muslim-dominated, Muslim-controlled in terms of politics, and then it spreads. And you've seen under Joe Biden a massive increase in immigration over the last 4 years, some of which will have come from Muslim countries. And you also see this issue of dawah. This is so important, dawah. Now, that is the Muslim term for the kind of invitation to God, the way that they're converting local Americans into Islam. This is happening. And we saw this in Detroit. We saw this in Hamtramck. One mosque or one imam told us that he had converted more than 50 Americans into Islam since October 7th, since those attacks last year. And they're pushing for this. They're pushing dawah all across, not just in Hamtramck, not just in Michigan, all across the United States. They are trying to convert people to become Muslims, and they're being successful in many, many places.
Steve, where can we get the full documentary? How long is it? How do we get it? Access to it? Other collateral materials? I want everybody to go see this. So how do they do that?
You can go to the GB News YouTube channel and you can watch the full thing. It's 35 minutes long for free on the GB News YouTube channel. So go to GB News on YouTube and you'll find it.
Okay, I'm making an announcement here. Grace and Mo will help me out, but tonight, later, we will find a time on our channels to take the GB News and to figure out how to stream this so they can get to traffic, but everybody can see it. We can give commentary. Steve Edginton, we hope that this is not your last documentary on this topic and many others. Thank you very much. GB News is the best. We love you guys, and thank you for coming on. What's your social media? Where do they go to find you on social media?
They can find me on Twitter. I'm at Stephen Edginton. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Do I have Michele Bachmann up? Congressman Bachmann, when I first got to know you over a decade ago, I actually made a film about you and your rise called Fire from the Heartland. You were the leading voice in this nation about this very problem, Sharia supremacism. Tell me about it.
Well, it's pushed by the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was outlawed in Egypt. It's also outlawed in England, and that's because they are a terrorist organization. They should have been outlawed in the United States. We should have made that designation. They seek Islamic supremacism, and what they seek is exactly what Mr. Edginton said. They seek to conquer. What they do in Europe is what they are doing currently in the United States. They're far advanced. The reason why there's been a problem in England is because there's a national censorship organization connected with the UK government called Ofcom. And Ofcom refuses to allow media to talk about things like the Pakistani men who rape young white women. So it'll be interesting to see if Ofcom comes against this documentary that GB News is showing. A friend of mine, Mark Stein, who's a commentator who used to sit in and substitute guest host for Rush Limbaugh, he has to go before the court in England on June 10th because Ofcom came after him when he was a host on GB News, because he talked about the white girls who were raped by the Pakistani rape gangs. So it's a question of censorship. And so the question will be in the United States, what form of censorship will we have? I hail from Minnesota. We have the highest population of Somalis in Minnesota of anywhere in the world. Minnesota became the first, Minneapolis became the first city in the nation. Minneapolis is controlled by Marxists. That's not me saying that. That's what they call themselves, Marxists, the people who run the city council. They approve to have the Islamic call to prayer before sunrise, 5 times a day until after dark. And this is broadcast, just like you were in an Islamic city in the Middle East, it's broadcast over speakers in Minneapolis. This should not be allowed. And this is done as a form of conquering. So implementing Sharia law, Islamic law is the goal. There is no intention to abide by American law.
Congressman, hang on. We're going to take a short break. We're going to go back to Jerusalem with Dean Bachmann and talk about the Muslim Brotherhood and their military arm, Hamas, in Gaza. Short commercial break. Back in a moment.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
So, Dean Bachmann, I want to make the connection between what's happening in England, what's happening in Dearborn, Michigan, in Hamtramck, to what's happening in Gaza in the in Hamas, the military arm. It's the Muslim Brotherhood that's in back of this. In Hamas, do you get a sense after being there for a couple of days and talking to the Knesset and talking to the president of Israel and leaders throughout the country that this thing is being brought to a conclusion? Because I'll be honest, I don't understand the military strategy now, and I keep hearing, the Biden administration is holding us back, but it seems they got enough weapons. I'm just not seeing a concentrated effort to get on with it in Rafah, ma'am.
Well, their political strategy is to win. The prime minister, the president, the members of the Knesset are all committed to defeating Hamas and to securing the Gaza area so that they will never again cause another bloody October 7th against the Israeli people. So they want to be able to cut them off militarily and politically, Hamas, and then save the Jewish people and the Jewish state. We can't underestimate what the world's response has been. The Biden administration has been overwhelmingly putting its foot on the brakes for Israel, to the point of saying, we're going to deny you weapons, we're going to deny you ammunition. They've really been like a schizophrenic twin brother to Israel. On one hand, their rhetoric is very pro-Israel. On the other hand, their actions have been anything but pro-Israel. And also the EU is the same way, and the United Nations. So Israel has virtually been standing alone in this effort, and the United States has been trying to micromanage every move that the Jewish state has tried to make to end this war. They actually could have been done months ago with this war. If they could have gone in, they aren't killing people indiscriminately. The truth be known, they have killed fewer civilians in urban warfare than any other private battle campaign, urban warfare campaign in history. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio of combatant to civilian. There's never been that low of a ratio before. And why are the Israelis the ones that are charged with securing safe zones for the Gazan civilians? And yet they're the ones that are told that they have to do that. Israel has done that. But again and again, our Secretary of State makes a phone call, or the president makes a phone call, and they tell Israel, stop. We won't let you do that. And so it's embarrassing as an American to see how we have interfered. I don't know that we have ever interfered to the level that we're interfering now, because quite honestly, Steve, our State Department has taken off its Team Israel jersey. They've put on Team Iran jerseys. That is the policy of the United States State Department. They want to see and help secure a victory for Iran. They don't want to secure a victory for Israel. That's the bottom line truth of what's going on. And Israel's trying to progress, but yet Barack Obama put Israel in handcuffs. Before he left office, he forced Israel to sign a 10-year agreement. And part of that agreement is that Israel had to shut down their munitions factories and their weapons factories and become wholly dependent on the United States. Hence, you see the problem that we have today. Israel can't prosecute this war unless they receive the weaponry from their allied partners, specifically the United States. The United States wrote a scenario under Barack Obama through our State Department to ensure that in the future, Israel would lose. That is the ultimate goal of the Biden administration.
When you say Team Iran, explain why would our State Department back Persia, which is a sworn enemy of the United States, and in addition, a ally or being underwritten by the Chinese Communist Party? Why would the State Department pick the Persians to back against our ally in the Middle East, the Israelis?
I would agree with you. It's absolutely absurd what the U.S. government is doing, but that is the Obama-Biden worldview from our foreign policy perspective. Go back to the years of Obama. That policy is the same policy today. I sat on the Intelligence Committee in the House of Representatives during the Obama years. It was inexplicable the actions that Obama took. Well over $200 billion have been put into the hands of Iran's leaders. The money that came to supply this nuclear program, because again, when Iran has a nuclear weapon, they have vowed they will use it. They will use it to annihilate the Jewish people because it's a Jew hatred. At the end of the day, that's all this is. They hate Jews. They hate the Jewish people, and they seek to kill every one of them and then to bomb the smithereens out of the land of Israel. That's their goal. And their proxies, whether they're in Yemen, whether they're in Syria, whether they're in Iraq, whether they are in Lebanon, whether they are in Gaza, whether they are living in Judea, Samaria, all of their proxies have the same end goal in mind. That's kill every Jew that you can and annihilate them. That's Iran's plan is what we saw on October 7th. We know that Iran had their fingers on October 7th. Their goal is to kill Jews. Why would the Obama administration be for that? Because they're for Team Iran. And why is it that the Obama administration let the cat out of the bag when there were efforts to have refueling stations in Azerbaijan? All of a sudden, one day, Team Obama let this be known on the front pages of the New York Times. There was a period of about 2-3 weeks where our highest national security secrets were played out on the front pages of the New York Times from the Obama administration. Why? Because they were cutting the legs off of Israel. That's why. They didn't want Israel to succeed in neutering Iran's nuclear program. The end goal is to see Iran obtain a nuclear weapon. And this is what everyone needs to understand. Once Iran has a nuclear weapon, Iran, like other sane nations in the world, Iran will use the nuclear weapon and they will drop it on Israel to annihilate their program. And remember, Israel is the little Satan. America is the big Satan. They will use their nuclear weapons on the United States as well.
As you're there with leaders, the president, the Knesset, other leaders, and parliaments that have come in support for this prayer breakfast, what is the view from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv about the bigger conflict than even Gaza and the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, but the war in the north? And it appears they're being encircled by the Persians and people that, quite frankly, look like they want to ally with them, either the Egyptians, the Saudis, I mean, the Gulf Emirates. You see a lot of happy talk that we're going to cut a deal, but you don't see a lot of pushback. What is their view of where they stand right now? Do they think they're actually, is it just bravado, or they really think they're going to win this war?
No, they believe they will win this war. There's a concept with the Muslim Brotherhood called 0 hour. And 0 hour means the moment when the Islamic supremacists see that they are going to conquer. They intend to conquer the world. They intend to conquer the West. That's what immigration is. Immigration has been a tool, almost a military tool, if you will. It's a form of asymmetric warfare to be able to conquer the West. They hadn't done immigration into Australia. Now they've started immigration into Australia. They've fully infiltrated into Europe. They've been infiltrating into North America. They've been extremely successful, but their goal is conquering. We hear this and we think it's crazy. It's absurd. How could they possibly conquer the United States of America? They have a plan to do that. That's what 0 hour is. And 0 hour is surrounding Israel with this ring of fire. They've been incredibly successful. You know, one time Iran did not control the southern part of Lebanon. They do. That's Hezbollah. They didn't have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in northern Gaza. They do now. They run Hamas. They didn't have that. They do now. They have Fatah in the Palestinian Authority. They run them. It's all Iranian money that comes through, but money is influence. And so they have been able to conquer and bring influence into Iraq. They've been able to bring influence into the Houthis and Yemen. And so this ring of fire has been surrounding Israel. But when the United States is acting in the contrary ways that we have been acting since October 7th, it's almost belies common sense. But it shows the reality of what American foreign policy is today. And American foreign policy at our completely corrupt State Department, Steve, is Team Iran. That's the jersey they're wearing. Why are they doing it? It's the Obama crowd that's running the Biden State Department. That's their end goal. So whether they're Jew haters or what they are, I don't know. But I do know that that's their end goal.
How do you, when you look at the Biden administration or the Biden regime, and you look at many of the people that are driving this, Yellen, Blinken, others, people in the State Department, they're Jewish. And if you look at the problem we've got in this whole situation between colonizers and the oppressed, most, I was going to say much, not all, but much of the money comes from progressive Jewish donors. And if you look at the problem we have on the campuses, many of the radical faculty, the neo-Marxists, basically agreeing with Sharia supremacism faculty, are Jewish. If you look at the kids, they had, a big part of, particularly the spokesmen and people who come up front, are Jewish. So how do people in Israel square the fact that much of this has been driven by money and smarts and brains and media savvy and all that are progressive Jews?
Well, we can all have different backgrounds, but it depends upon what ideology a person subscribes to. If they subscribe to the woke ideology that is dominant today, the woke ideology that runs the State Department, the woke ideology that runs the campuses with the campus riots. There's even woke ideology here in Israel, even on Israeli campuses. The woke ideology dominates, and the woke ideology hates Jews and hates Judaism. The physical land of Israel doesn't mean they hate that physical land, but they hate the ideology of Judaism that is grounded in a biblical worldview, a Judaistic biblical worldview. That's what they hate. They hate the Judeo-Christian worldview, the foundational cultural element that is grounded in the Bible and the God of the Bible. That's what they hate. One of the foundations of the Bible is the covenant, and the covenant that God gave in the book of Genesis is that to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that people group is given a certain land according to Genesis 15:18. That land, those people are for the purpose of being a blessing to all families on earth. That's what it says in the covenant. And there is an all-out effort to destroy that covenant, that blessing that can come to all people. So that's a theological implication with the foreign policy outcomes that we're seeing coming out of the State Department. It is most definitely a clash of ideologies, a Judeo-Christian ideology, worldview, and culture versus a worldview that despises that worldview and seeks to destroy it at every turn. And some people may have a genetic or an ancestral connection to Judaism, but what they abide by and what they espouse is woke ideology, which is antithetical to a biblical Christian, Judeo-Christian worldview.
You brought the issues with the WHO and other things to Jerusalem this week to alert people and to start to awaken. Tell us, before we let you bounce, tell us about the prayer breakfast. What's the purpose? Who attends? What are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, this is the 8th year of the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. We've held a Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast here in Jerusalem for 8 years, but then we've gone to 20 other cities around the world that have invited us to come and just to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. There's a lot of people that love Israel and love the Jewish people, and they want to pray for peace because this is a volatile area. Why is the Middle East volatile? Ask yourself that. Why is it volatile? It's because of Sharia supremacism. It's because of the concept of conquering. The fact that there are those people who hate Jews and they want to kill Jews. That's what it comes down to. These wars aren't begun by Israel against Muslims. 20% of Israel are Muslims. Muslims that live in Israel have all the same rights as Jews. Muslims serve in the Israeli Knesset. So this is no apartheid state, and Israel has every right to the land under international law for over 100 years. The problem is the haters of the Jewish people, the people that want to see Jews dead. That's what this comes down to. So the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is about prayer, and there's a need for prayer because there are those who hate the Jews, the Jewish people, and the land that they live in, and they want to see the destruction of the Jewish state. So I think there's a reason why God called people to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and that's why we're here. We're not here to be political. We're here to be biblical, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And different people bring political issues up, but that's not necessarily why we're here. We're here to pray, and to pray that there is peace in the world by peace coming to Jerusalem.
Okay, is there a place people can go, a website, whatever, to find out more about this? And then I want to also make sure everybody goes to the Sovereignty Coalition. Let's take the prayer breakfast first. Where do they go to find out more information?
The Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is JerusalemPrayerBreakfast.org, JerusalemPrayerBreakfast.org, and you get all the information on that. As far as the World Health Organization, every resource that you would need can be found at the SovereigntyCoalition.org, SovereigntyCoalition.org, and then /resources. On that site is the statement of dispute. And no matter what nation you live in, you can print out the statement of dispute. I gave that today to some of the top leaders in Israel and told them they could file the statement of dispute with the World Health Assembly and slow this whole process down. So we could slow down the advancement of the World Health Organization if different nations would file this statement of dispute with the World Health Assembly. So if anyone here is connected to any other nation, file that, and we can slow this thing down. We also have, I want to remind you, the letters from half of the U.S. senators telling President Biden, we think this is a terrible idea, what you're advancing at the World Health Organization. Stop it. So half the U.S. senators, half the U.S. attorney generals, half the U.S. governors have woke up and finally seeing the light and said, do not do this, Joe Biden. We don't want to see you do this. And Donald Trump has come out as a Republican nominee and said he categorically refutes what Joe Biden is doing at the World Health Organization. So we have a high contrast between the two political parties on their view of global governance and global government versus local control on healthcare. Because at the end of the day, Steve, this has nothing to do with public health. This has everything to do with global governance and global control.
Dean Bachmann, thank you so much. Once again, is there an email people, in case people want to get to you? I know you don't do social media, but where do they go for to actually contact you?
Yes, just type my name in, Michele Bachmann, at regent.edu, R-E-G-E-N-T, regent.edu, where I'm dean, and type in Michele Bachmann, and the email will come to me, and I'd be delighted to speak to anyone who wants to email me.
Thank you, Dean Bachmann. Look forward to talking to you more while you're still in Jerusalem. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Someone who knows this fight. She's been at it for over a decade, and when I first met her, this was her... the border, immigration, this whole issue with Sharia supremacism, she was at the tip of the spear. It's one of the reasons she led for a pretty good time the 2012 primary back in 2011. And think of what would happen if we'd had Michele Bachmann go up against Barack Obama. Would that have been a pretty good debate? You think he would have survived the debate stage? Don't think so. Birch Gold, times of turbulence. You just heard it right there. Persia's, quite frankly, ascendant. This war in the Middle East could not get more serious. And yes, it is about the United States of America. They view Israel as an adjunct to the Judeo-Christian West America. That's why they call them the little Satan, and we're the big Satan. You hear it all the time, death to America. Birchgold.com, compare the rise of gold and the price of gold with the decline of the dollar. Understand that spread, and you understand what a hedge is against times of turbulence. The people that can teach that to you are the folks at Birch Gold. First off, you get the End of the Dollar Empire. You can take that and download it all for free, but you can also talk to Philip Patrick and the team, birchgold.com/Bannon. Lou Dobbs is next. We're going to be back live 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I want to give a shout out to Glenn Story and the team at Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/Bannon. They've got the Patriot Mobile One plan now. It'll blow you away. You've got a number of carriers, of service providers that you can draft off of simultaneously. But they are a company that supports your values. And Glenn Story and these guys have put all the chips in the middle of the table. Go find out more on the Patriot Mobile story. It's absolutely incredible. One last thing is they try to close the gap in these deficits, and we're going to have hopefully Bob Good on tomorrow and some other guys from the House Freedom Caucus talk about it. Tax Network USA, TNUSA.com. Go check it out. Find out how they can help you when the IRS tries to get blood from a stone. That would be you. Lou Dobbs is next. We're back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We'll see you back here in the War Room.